Rabbi David Mivasair, who is one of the leading voices of this growing, burgeoning phenomenon of Jews for justice for the Palestinians. Rabbi, thank you very much for joining us. What lies behind this tremendous growth, do you think? I'm watching Jews leading the occupation of railway stations. I'm seeing Jewish figures, recognizably Jewish figures, seizing the initiative, popping up before Blinken's face or behind his head with the placards and so on. There's a new militancy amongst Jews for peace. Tell us about it.
I think it comes out of very authentic Jewish demands for justice and for peace, and standing with the underdog and doing what we can to help, and also recognizing a lot of Jewish responsibility, because this is all being done by the state that claims to be the Jewish state. And many of us, including myself, for years supported that state. Many of us have lived there for years. Many of us have family there. So I think we feel a strong responsibility to do everything we can to end this current slaughter and go beyond that and really work toward justice, equality, and freedom for everyone. I'll say it, everyone, from the river to the sea. Everyone should live in equality.
Amen. We're more familiar with the ultra-Orthodox opponents of Zionism. They say it's a nationalist ideology which has nothing to do with Judaism. We're more familiar with secular Jews who are, if you like, culturally Jewish, historically Jewish, but not really practicing the religious practice of Judaism. And you represent a third stream, in a sense, don't you? You are religious, you're not ultra-Orthodox, you're not secular, but you're equally determined.
That's very true. And I'll just say, so people know, I'm part of an organization in the US that's called Jewish Voice for Peace. You can find us online at jvp.org. There's over 200,000 of us. And among those 200,000, there's something like 60 or 80 rabbis like myself. I'll just say modern rabbis, progressive rabbis, who are organized to be a rabbinic council. And we, on October 18th, we led kind of a takeover of a congressional office building. And a couple dozen of us rabbis were arrested, over 300 Jewish people were arrested. There's over 3,000 of us out in the street, in Independence Avenue on Capitol Hill, like blocking the street and holding it for hours. So, George, when you say there's like a rising tide of Jews getting involved who are somewhere between what you described as ultra-Orthodox and secular, you're quite right. Yeah.
Well, it's a three-pronged fork in the eye for those usually Christians, oftentimes evangelical Christians, who conflate Jewishness, conflate Judaism with the nationalist creed of Zionism, and not just Zionism, but a kind of extremist stripe of Zionism represented by Netanyahu and those to the right of him. It must be causing some consternation amongst those who seek to make that conflation.
We are trying to interrupt the false narrative that what Israel does is for the Jewish people, and that what our governments do. I listened to you before talking about your government in the UK, the government that I was born and raised under in the US, and the government I live with now in Canada. But the people in charge of those governments want to pretend that their support for Israel is somehow support for Jews. And what we're doing is trying to absolutely discredit that, interrupt it, make it clear that that's not true. I don't think the evangelical Christians care about Jews at all. Like their religious ideology leads them to think that something like Jesus will come back when the Jews go back to the Holy Land. And when we do, then it'll be like a apocalypse or something. All the Jews will have a chance to become Christians, and if they don't, we're all going to go to hell, where we'll suffer and burn forever. So this is like a complete conflation, not only of Judaism and the state of Israel, but the stuff that they read in the Bible, they're like kind of projecting that onto the state of Israel, right? The state of Israel is not the Israel that's in the Bible. And the living, breathing Jewish people that you may have as like friends and neighbors in the UK or me here right now, we're not like pawns in their religious game, to get Jesus to come back. So like, you said it may be causing consternation for them. I have no idea what they're thinking or feeling or believing, but I know what we are doing, and we need to get out there and express ourselves, like in the kind of the public discourse, to interrupt this very false narrative, that somehow Israel's acting for the Jewish people, and that our governments that support Israel are doing that for the Jewish people. It's just not true. And more Jews are seeing that.
Well,
yeah. You know what?
You use the term, Rabbi, interrupt. I use the term disrupt. It means the same thing in this context. But I have made the journey literally several times from Armageddon to the gates of the Gaza Strip. It's less than 100 miles from Armageddon to Gaza. And these people in the United States are trying to make us take that trip, make that journey in the opposite direction for reasons which have nothing to do with care for the Jewish people, whom, as you rightly put it, they would have put to death if their end of times were to be heralded by events such as we're living through now.
Well, I think that's all true. And of course, they have no regard for Palestinian people. And we're all as valid as people as anyone else, as each other, as them themselves, right? We all have a right to live and to be free and to be in safety and to live our lives. Yeah. So, you talked about kind of let me just throw in something that may be helpful for your listeners. And there was a poll done in the United States in the spring of 2021 by a very legitimate organization called the Jewish Electoral, I forgot the last word of it, but it was just a completely legitimate poll. You can find it online to look at Jewish Americans' attitudes about Israel. And of all Jewish Americans, they said something like 35% agree that Israel is an apartheid state. And at that time, which was more than 2 years ago, 35% of Jews in America agreed that Israel is committing genocide. And of Jews under the age 40, this shocks me, 20% responded that Israel does not have a right to exist. And I believe that poll is valid. First of all, it's just a legitimate poll done by a polling company that had no interest in the outcome whatsoever. And second, I live in the Jewish world. That's who I live among. That's who I talk with. It's my family, my friends. And it sounds like that poll reflecting what I see. And again, it so contradicts the messaging that's put out by the central Jewish organizations in the UK, in the US, and Canada, and elsewhere. They're like, the Jewish community supports Israel. And if our members of parliament or whatever, if they don't comply with that, the Jews are going to be very upset. And, I recommend anybody that wants to know, just look up this poll.
I'm sure people will be as we are speaking, Rabbi. Where does this all go, in your opinion? There are pictures tonight. I don't know how long they stayed on the beach, but they were on the beach. Israeli soldiers on the beach at Gaza, declaring that this is now their land and they don't intend to leave it. Netanyahu has claimed, although former Prime Minister Olmert has contradicted him, that he intends to reoccupy Gaza and govern it. Blinken has said that that will not be permitted. It's not clear anyway that Gaza will be able to be conquered. The resistance is very fierce, and the troops have not even yet entered Gaza City, and the piles of ruins and rubble are ideal fighting ground for people who know every inch of that city. So the military outcome, never mind the political, cannot yet safely be predicted. But do you see this killing going on for another month, for another month after that?
Just say that's a very good question. I really don't try to predict the future. You know, what I would say to that, George, is I think we all have a responsibility and some possibility to influence our own governments, you know, so that they try to weigh in and change this. I can't predict what will be, but I certainly know what should be. And those of us who live in countries that purport to be democracies, you know, we have some ways that we can try to influence that. I understand your question. It's an extremely dire situation, hour by hour, day by day. I am personally in contact with at least a dozen families in Gaza, and sometimes I lose contact with them. Every time that happens, I don't know if I'll ever hear from them again. And of course, as we all know, there's thousands of people being killed. So what's going to happen, I can't say. And I just urge everyone to do everything we possibly can. And I don't even know what we can realistically do, because honestly, our governments are so unresponsive, as you were saying, right? Like right here, I'm in Toronto right now. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of people in the streets.
Yeah.
That means we have to just keep trying and trying and pushing and pushing. And eventually the leaders will figure out that they have to get out in front of us in order to lead us.
Yes, it seems like a brick wall, but even a brick wall can fall if enough people are pushing it. Rabbi, I take my hat off to you and to all your fellow Jews that are struggling for peace and for justice. May God go with you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.